So it is still chapter 6, Roots of Black Radicalism. Well, part 2, chapter 6, Roots of Black Radicalism, Historical Archaeology of the Black Radical Tradition, Black for Red, the use of indigenous labor to the use of African labor. So, let's begin. Oh, wait, how are you? How you doing? I'm a little baked. Just a little bit. I still haven't figured out how to add music, but I didn't really try. I'm not gonna lie. But one day we'll put like some smooth jazz in the background if I can, but I don't know if I'm allowed to. Davidson argues that it is now fairly certain that in the period 1519 to 1650, the area, New Spain, received at least 120,000 slaves, or 2/3 of all the Africans imported into the Spanish possessions in America. Hello? It's not really important, but anyways. Enriqueta Vila's more recent studies, as we have already seen, confirm Davidson's impressions while substantially expanding the total number of transported Africans. The colonial industries of sugar and cloth production, and later of the silver mines, were the primary sites to which African labor was assigned. As Indian labor atrophied, atrophied during the second half of the century in consequence of its unnatural declines or legal restrictions, and the settlers stumbled upon the riches of silver mines in the New World, African workers began their domination of the labor of the plantations and the mines. Because remember how we was talking about once colonization hit, it was disease, lack of birth rate. It just seems like colonization is just so ugly. Anyways, I was just thinking about that last part. You know how like the guy was like, there was no, here, the last video. There was no sickness, there was no aching bones, they had no high fever, they had then no smallpox, they had then no burning chest, they had then no abdominal pain, they had then no consumption, they had then no headache. At that time, the course of humanity was orderly. The foreigners made it otherwise when they arrived here. Anyways. By 1750, Mexico contained over 20,000 Africans. By 1650, their numbers were believed to be closer to 35,000. By then, what amounted to a supplement of more than 100,000 Afro-mestizos of Black Indian parentage. Damn. Again, by the later period, Davidson states 8,000 to 10,000 Africans would be found working the sugar plantations and cattle ranches in the eastern region around the coastal lowlands between Veracruz and Pucano, and the slopes of the Sierra Madre Oriental. Another 15,000 were absorbed by the silver mines and the ranches of the regions north and west of Mexico City. 3,000 to 5,000 were bound to similar industries located between Puebla and the Pacific coast, and 20,000 to 50,000 employed in urban occupations in Mexico City and the Valley of Mexico. By the beginning of the 19th century, Gonzalo Aguirre Beltran states the descendants of these workers, who by then were classified in rough terms as blacks, mulattoes, and Zambos, Afro-Indians, that's the Zambos, were reported in the 1810 census at 634,461, a little more than a tenth of the Mexican population. There is, however, much more to be understood of their presence in Mexico and the Spanish colonies of the Indies and South America than their mere numbers. The systematic transportation of black labor in the New World had not always been an obvious or requisite step. For a few decades, as we have seen, it had not seemed necessary at all. When it did begin, it almost completely overturned the more casual application of Iberian racial structures that had already been transferred to the colonies. See how there's like racism before race? Like, it's so interesting because they was being racist to their own, And then they was being racist to like, it's interesting. It's like, whatever. Sorry guys, I have cotton mouth. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. Hold up. Let me drink a little bit of coffee. Anyways. Thanks. Ooh, delish. Girl, I have my papers right here. Okay. In the beginning, that is, most probably in the decade that ended in the 15th century most certainly in the one that began the 16th, small groups of enslaved Africans had come to the New World as companions of the conquistadors. When Nicolas de Ovando took up his governorship of Hispaniola in 1502, we're not doing it that way. I thought that would... We're moving too much, y'all. Don't judge my mess. It adds character. I thought I closed that vent, but it feels like I'm getting more air with that thing closed sometimes. Of Hispaniola in 1502, his company included an unknown number of black and mulatto servitors. They were Landinos, Hispanicized blacks. Okay, Hispanicized blacks are Landinos. Zambos are Afro-Indians, so that's when their parents have Indian or indigenous, and then African parents. Okay. But within they were Landinos, Hispanicized blacks. But within the year, Ovando requested of his king that she prevent all future arrivals of such people. He reported that those already on the island had been a source of scandal to the Indians, and some had fled their owners and established independent settlements in the mountains. That's funny. They said, concerned that the Indians might be led on the path of Christian righteousness, Isabella led from the path of Christian righteousness. Isabella immediately barred the shipment of Landinos. The Queen of Castile, however, had provided only short relief for Landino workers. She died in 1504. And the colonies had been previously... Oh my God, girl. Sorry. She died in 1504, and the colonies that had previously been exclusively administered by Castile now came under the direction of her husband, Ferdinand of Aragon. Ferdinand. Okay. Who at some point became convinced that one black could do the work of 4 Indians, informed Ovando that the threat of black rebellion was offset by the need of black labor in the mines and plantations. He's like, nah, we just need to work. That's funny though. From 1505 until 1522, Landino slaves increasingly replaced the native workforce as the latter was disseminated by the discipline of encomienda. That is a system of owning people. It's like a whole hierarchical system. Let me show you. Encomienda. I need some aquaphor. Oops. Girl, this is not like a professional setup. Guys, I tried learning how to edit, and I just felt like I was bad at it. And so I was like, girl, I'm fine. We're just going to be reading, like, it's like a discussion. We're just here for a book club. Okay. The encomienda system was a Spanish labor system of the Americas and the Philippines that forced indigenous people to provide labor and tribute to Spanish colonists. Yuck. This is what it looked like. Let me show you. Hello. Right? So at the bottom it says Africans. The bottom is Africans, phenotypically of African descent. Then indigenous, phenotypically of indigenous descent. Zambos, people of mixed indigenous and African ancestry. Mulattoes, people of mixed European and African ancestry. Mestizos, people of people of mixed European and indigenous ancestries. Cor- Corillos? Wait. Corillos? Offspring of the Spaniards born in America. Spaniards, phenotypically white individual born in Spain. Let's screenshot that. Because I could put that in my little note. Like the little hierarchy. Anyways. Ugh. Charge. Guys. Sorry. Okay. Disease. Okay, let me go back. From 1505 until 1522, Ladino slaves increasingly replaced the native force as the latter was disseminated by the discipline of the encomienda, disease, and demoralization. In the latter year, the policy prohibiting the import of Landinos was reinstituted. The policy was reiterated in 1530, 1532, 1543, and 1550, and in the various asientos granted between 1595 and 1609. Henceforth, only bozales, Africans obtained in Africa, were to be eligible for the transport to. I was reading that correct. Were to be eligible. Now I'm messing myself up. Were to be eligible for transport to the New World. We shall investigate the reasons behind this turn of fortune shortly. A few Landinos, however, played less anonymous parts in the conquest of the New World. Leslie Rout characterized them as compatriots. One, Nufolo de Olano, accompanied Balboa in 1513. I hope I said that correctly. Another, Juan Gario, in parentheses, handsome John, apparently crossed the Atlantic as a free man, participated in the siege of Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan in 1521, and in subsequent conquests and explorations, tried his hand as an entrepreneur with both Negro and Indian slaves of his own in the early search for gold, and took his place as a citizen of the Spanish quarter of Mexico City. Gario. Dang, that was so. My face is getting better, but it's like all right here. Whose fortunes were entirely linked to those of his patron, Hernan Cortes, died in poverty. A victim, it is believed, of the Great Plague that struck Mexico City in 1547. Esteban a second. Estebanico, in parentheses, was with the less hardy Nevadas in Florida in 1528. Having survived his master, he completed an 8-year trek from Florida to Mexico City with three other conquistadors, only to perish in the lands of Zuni in 1538 while acting as a guide for another master, Friar, Friar, Marcos de Ninzia, Niza, Ninzia. I hope I said that correctly. I should definitely relearn Spanish and definitely learn American Sign Language. I know some, but not that much, but I want to learn more. Juan Valiente accompanied Alvado's army, in its march from Guatemala to Peru. How do you say it? Peru? That's so American. Peru. How are you supposed to say it? Peru? Girl, how are you supposed to say it? I'm working on my pronunciations. I can't. Puerto. I know Hawaii. And then Palestine. Girl, I have so much time. I could probably learn a couple languages if I really tried. That would be fun. Anyways, where would we at? In 1534, in 1536, and 1540, Valiente fought with Valvida's army against the, oh Lord, I don't know how to say this, Araucanian, Araucanian, Ar Araucanian Indians in Chile in 1546 when Valvida granted him an estate, and in 1548 Valiente became the first Landino to receive an encomienda. Significantly enough, when he died in 1553, killed in action against the Arauca, Arauca, and his old man's master Alfonso Valiente had begun legal action to reclaim him in any property he had amassed. Other Landinos were to be found in the entourages of Avilia, I don't know, in 1514, Narvaez during his initial appearance in the New World in 1520, Alvarado and his expeditionary force into Guatemala. Wait, Guatemala? Is that how you're supposed to say it? Guatemala. Colombia. Okay. In 1523, Montejo in Yucatan in 1532, and Pizarro as well. Jose Franco reminds us the Spaniards frequently used Negroes and Indians as shock troops in their own internal wars. Still, it seems they were as historically inconspicuous as the white slaves, who shared their condition in the New World of the early 16th century. In economic terms, however, theirs was the first phase that would lead ultimately to the placement of Africans in the Indies, Nueva España, Peru, Colombia, Chile, Venezuela, Argentina, and I can't do this one. Uruguay. No, Uruguay. I need to hear someone say it. As domestics, growers of sugar, wheat, grapes, olives, cacao, miners of gold and silver, craft workers, blacksmiths, cobblers, brick masons, carpenters, tailors, teamsters, cowboys, pearl divers, and prostitutes. Their consequences, though, were not simply economic. Slave labor required the elaboration of systems of control and discipline. Okay. Moreover, the intercourse of the several races extant in Spain's new possession precipitated the formation of rather complex racial codes and codifications. The results were practical while being barbaric and absurd. I'm going to give a trigger warning right now. Some of the things that are about to be mentioned are actually kind of, like when I first read this, I was like, oh. And I was like, let me put this down for a second, because it was just hard to hear in the sense like, wow. But trigger warning. In Spanish America, the lash, the stock, detention, and deprivation were standard means by which unruly and defiant slaves were kept in line. Some masters were known to have whipped their bondsmen to death, while others continued to mutilate their dusky properties with hot branding irons even after the crown had prohibited this act. Have you seen those pictures of like the people with brands all over them, and like you're like, people really did this? And like that's but like, you know, when you see those types of images, or the image of the whips all over someone's back, like it's like, you know, when you like first learn about slavery, they don't really talk about like they'll talk about it, but they won't get into like the details until you're older, and you're like, wow. And like the gravity of violence and lethality. Okay, let me stop because I'm gonna keep talking, but like the lethality against like people, like human beings, like I could not imagine. I could not imagine. But that's the thing, I can, and I see, like, you know what I mean? Like, you see this type of brutality, and you're just like, it's, I can't find the right word in my brain, but if I do, I'll come back to it. But I'm gonna keep going, and it gets worse. It's kind of, and it's a lot. Worst of all were the vengeful sadists who made their slaves eat excrement and drink urine. Castration and the serving of other limbs were common and legal. Adguier Beltran reports that some slave mulattoes who were no longer phenotypically distinct from the ruling class had to be branded, with hot irons in places where this insignia of servitude could not for a moment be hidden. The faces of many of them were completely covered with branded legends saying, "I am the slave of Señor Marque de Valle. I am the slave of Donda Francesca Carreo de Beltran." Such treatments and the almost inevitable foul conditions in which most of them labored reduced the acting working lives of slaves between 10 and 20 years. Okay, pause, and then we're going to get to the next part.